Rural Heritage on RFD TV is brought to you by Rural Heritage Magazine, a bi-monthly magazine featuring articles about farming and logging with draft animal power, small-scale diversified family farming and homesteading, and other aspects of our rich rural heritage. Rural Heritage Magazine, borrowing from yesterday to do the work of today. For subscription information, please call 319-362-3027 or order online at www.ruralheritage.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Mishka. Welcome to another episode of Rural Heritage TV. Today we're heading back to Kalona, Iowa, population 2,663. For such a small town, there's a lot to see and do in Kalona. We showed you the Kalona Sales Barn in a previous episode, and we've covered some of the historical village in Kalona in another show. We still have more to show you of the Village Museum, as well as the amazing quilt museum there. That will be in May. Today we're going to spend a half hour looking at the Iowa Mennonite Museum and Archives in Kalona. You may think you know all about the Plain community culture and history, but I can assure you there's probably a lot more for you to learn. Tom Meyers has spent a lot of time studying Amish and Mennonite culture and history and graciously agreed to show us around the museum.
Welcome to the museum. I'd like to point out three words that are important to our story: the Amish, the Mennonites, and the Anabaptists. In the 16th century, Martin Luther broke away from the Catholic Church and the Protestant Reformation occurred. Of course, we know that Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the Wittenberg church door in Germany, in Eastern Germany. Luther was one of many reformers. One of the lesser-known reform groups are the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists got their name, and it was not a name of their choosing, it was a name that was given to them because they believed that a person should make an adult decision about becoming a member of a church, about becoming baptized. So, even though they'd been baptized as infants, they asked to be rebaptized as adults, and therefore others gave them this name, Anabaptist. Because people would not baptize infants, they were persecuted, they were imprisoned, tortured. There are many, many stories in the Mennonite Amish tradition about that era. Here's one of the most well-known stories that's in a book called The Martyr's Mirror. The man to the left is Dirk Willems. He was imprisoned in Holland for being an Anabaptist, and one day he managed to escape the prison by tying his bed sheets together, going down the prison walls, running across the countryside. He came to a pond, and he crossed the pond successfully, but the jailer who was chasing him fell through the ice. Hence, the other picture is of the jailer. Willems, instead of fleeing, turns around, grabs the jailer, pulls him out of the ice, saves his life. The jailer, in turn, re-incarcerates Willems. He goes back to prison and dies the death of a martyr. Willing to give his own life for his enemy is part and parcel of what it meant to be an Anabaptist. Let's go back to a timeline. This yellow timeline presents graphically all the different descendants of the Anabaptists, but you'll notice there are two starting points, here and here. The northern starting point represents the Anabaptists from the Netherlands. The southern starting point is where the Anabaptists were in Switzerland, those who came from Switzerland and South Germany. The northern one is important for many reasons, but one of them is that the Mennonites, who came from the Anabaptists, who emerged from the Anabaptists, take their name from Menno Simons. Menno Simons was a Dutch Catholic priest who decided to join the Anabaptist movement, and it's from him that Mennonites get their name. Menno Simons was not the founder of the Mennonites, but he was an important leader among the Dutch Mennonites. The South, the Swiss Brethren, there are two very different centers with very different histories, but it's out of this stream that the Amish come. The Mennonites originated in the 16th century. It's not until almost 2 centuries later that the Amish emerge. In 1693, the Amish, it's right here on the chart, the Amish break away from the Mennonites. Many people assume that the Amish were first because they're more conservative, and the Mennonites came along second. It's just the opposite. In 1693, there were a lot of refugees from Switzerland who'd moved up into eastern France, an area we call Alsace, and there was a group of ministers who had some disagreements. On one side was Jacob Amen, a man who was probably a convert to the Anabaptist movement, who wanted to get back to some fundamentals. And the other side was a man by the name of Hans Reist. He was a Mennonite who'd left Switzerland, who'd faced persecution, was less zealous for the faith, and they got into a disagreement, which eventually led to Amen and his group breaking away from the Mennonites, and that's the beginning of the Amish church in 1693. The Amish and Mennonites have been separate since that point in time. All the other lines on this chart represent people who broke away from the Amish, who broke away from the Dutch Mennonites. There are many, many smaller groupings of both Amish and Mennonites. What they all had in common in the beginning was a two-kingdom theology. What do I mean by that? A two-kingdom theology simply means that people are aware that there is a kingdom of this world and there's a kingdom of God. And what you have to do is constantly be aware of the boundary line between the two. So many of the oddities, or the things that we find strange about the Amish, their use of the horse and buggy, their lack of electricity in their homes, etc., are all about the boundary line. I call them symbolic separators. So that when I'm driving down the road in my horse and buggy as an Amish person, and an English person goes around me, speeds around me, I'm aware that I'm different. I'm in the kingdom of God. I'm not in the kingdom of this world. So that notion of separation from the world, the two-kingdom theology, is fundamental to understanding these people from the beginning. The Mennonites have had much less of a need to have strict separation. So if we go back to a map, these maps show where Mennonites and Amish people are in the US and around the world. There are now Amish people in more than 30 states, 4 Canadian provinces, and 2 South American countries. There are over 350,000 Amish, old order Amish people in the world. The map on the right shows Mennonites. And the interesting thing now is that there are more Mennonites in places like Africa, Asia, South America, than there are in North America. In fact, the reality is that the number of North American and European Mennonites is declining. The growth is in other parts of the world. Obviously, Mennonites have had involvements in mission and service work in other parts of the world, and that helps to explain the growth in those parts of the world.
So that's a very brief overview of the origins of the Amish and Mennonite faiths and their current distribution throughout the world. When we come back, Tom will talk to us about their history in the U.S., particularly in Iowa. If you enjoy seeing how our ancestors lived during America's rule yesterday, you're going to love looking at these books. Volume 1 is fieldwork showing horses and vintage tractors preparing seed beds, planting, cultivating, and harvesting the crop. Volume 2 shows the work being done in the barn and farmyard, feeding and watering the livestock, getting the crop into the barn, milking the cows, shearing the sheep, and collecting the eggs. In Volume 3, we go inside the home to see the family in the kitchen canning vegetables, in the parlor listening to the radio, and in the dining room for family supper. We also head into town to shop at the general store or visit on the town square on Saturday night. Each book has over 140 large format pages. They sell for $24.95 each, or you can buy 2 for $44.95, or all 3 for $54.95 plus shipping. Call 1-877-647-2452 to order. That's 1-877-647-2452.
The Amish here in Iowa are moving, just like they are in many other places. This map is a map of Iowa, of course, and we are right here at Kalona, south of Iowa City. All these little red squares, both south and north, represent new Amish settlements. The Amish, if they want to be an agrarian people, if they want to continue farming, cannot stay in their densely populated communities. They have to move. So many of these southern, especially the southern and the northern settlements for that matter, began with this interest in continuing having one's offspring, one's children continue to farm in places where farmland is available and less expensive. There are 22 distinct Amish settlements in the state of Iowa. It used to be that the community here near Kalona was the largest. That's no longer the case. The largest community is near Bloomfield. It's slightly larger than the one here in Iowa. We have some history of this community. The first Amish who came here came in 1846. There were 3 families, a Schwarzentuber family, a Gingrich family, a Wirtz family, who moved here with the idea of establishing a new settlement. Their home was in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, and other places along the way. They came at a time when this was primarily prairie and woodland, and turned the land into agricultural places where there was agricultural possibilities. It was a difficult time. This plow is fascinating in that most of the immigrants to this area had to walk to Dubuque to get their deed to the land. And you know that the government provided money for a man to create a trail from this area all the way to Dubuque with a plow just like this, not this exact plow, but a plow like this. So these people would have walked to Dubuque to get the deeds to their land. The Amish community grew here slowly, and like many other areas, there were disagreements. I showed the chart with all those splinter groups. They started as Amish, whom we now know as the Old Order Amish. And over time, there were disagreements within the Amish community about how to be Amish, particularly as modern innovations came along, like Sunday school, like mission movement, like interest in higher education. So there was a progressive group that broke away from the Old Order Amish, and they were called Amish Mennonites into the 20th century. And by the 20th century, early 20th century, the name Amish was dropped by this group, and they are simply known as the Mennonites in Johnson County, Washington County, and surrounding counties. We now have a sizable population of both Mennonites and Amish. They share this common heritage, but they have a different understanding of how to be Mennonite or Amish in the 21st century. There are lots of other things to see here in the museum. This is a display about music at different points in time in the Amish and Mennonite traditions. The Mennonites adopted 4-part singing in the 20th century. They adopted hymnals, many variations of hymnals. The Amish continue to use this book. The Ausbund is the oldest continuously used Protestant hymn book in existence. Those hymns, the texts, most of them come from the 16th century. They are sung very slowly. The texts are in an archaic German. Amish people have decided to preserve that hymnal. If you hear it sung in an Amish church service, it sounds almost like Gregorian chant. The second song that's sung in every Amish church service is called the Loblied, and I have timed that song. The fastest I've ever heard it sung is 15 minutes for 4 verses. 24 minutes is the slowest I've heard it sung. So it sounds very different. It sounds from a different time, and it is from a different time. The Amish have hung on to tradition. They have wanted to preserve their way of life. They're very cautious about change. Indeed, they are conscious about what change might bring to their culture. So they didn't adapt the car. They certainly didn't adapt the television because they knew that these modern innovations would have an impact on their lives, particularly their family and community life.
You've seen our America's Rural Yesterday 3-book set covering life on the farm in the early 1900s. We're excited to bring you a 4th edition to the series, Early Tractors, featuring more than 250 photos of early American tractors like Alice Chalmers, Oliver, John Deere, Farmall, Minneapolis Moline, and lots more. Most of the photos are of new or almost new tractors back in the day, showing exactly how they were configured when they came out of the factory. Tractor collectors, history buffs, and folks simply wanting to reminisce about farm life in America's Rural Yesterday will love to have this book. It sells for $24.95 plus shipping. If you buy more than one book in the series, the price per book goes down all the way to $69.95 for all 4 books. To order, call toll-free 877-647-2452 or visit www.mishka.com. That's 1-877-647-2452.
This is a display about Amish schools in this area. The Amish have decided when public schools consolidated in the late 20th century, beginning in the 60s and the 70s, many of the small country schools disappeared and large consolidated schools emerged. The Amish said, we're not real comfortable with sending our children some distance, first of all, to a consolidated school, but more importantly, to a school where we won't know the teachers, we won't know the curriculum, we won't know we won't have a vested interest directly in what our children are learning. So they began to build their own schools. These are pictures of some of the schools that are in this community. It was a hotly contested issue. It went all the way to the Supreme Court in a case called Yoder versus Wisconsin. In the state of Wisconsin, it came to a head, and the Supreme Court finally said they have a right to have their own schools. They have a right to use teachers from their own people, typically a young person with an 8th grade education themselves. Amish people do not go to school beyond the 8th grade. They say a child has learned enough at that point to be a functional adult, to be a farmer, to work in cottage industries, to work in places where they have the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic that they've acquired in public schools. There is the famous case near Hazleton where the sheriff comes to arrest fathers of children who were in Amish schools, and the children flee to the cornfields. This appeared in newspapers across the country. Obviously, this was a time before the Yoder versus Wisconsin case. In states like Iowa, where it wasn't settled yet, there were people who were incarcerated because they refused to send their children to public schools. This is one of the older Mennonite church buildings here in the Kalona area. It's the West Union Church. One of the contentious issues in the 19th century for the Amish was, do we build church buildings or do we continue to have church in homes? And their decision, the old order was that we want to continue to keep having church every other Sunday, not every Sunday, every other Sunday in our homes. The Mennonites, the Amish Mennonite contingent, people who left the old order, said we prefer to build buildings. And this is one of the older buildings, the older meeting houses. Mennonites traditionally have not used the word church. They've used the word meeting house. The meeting house is the place where the church people come to meet on a Sunday morning. The church may be the building, but that's not what's crucial. It's the group of people who are meeting on any given Sunday morning. There are many other things here in the museum that go back in time. This is one of the oldest Bibles from 1553. There was a printer in the 16th century in Switzerland whose name was Froschauer. Froschauer produced this Bible, the Luther translation of the Bible, in the Swiss dialect. This was the Bible, and to some extent continues to be the Bible that the Amish prefer. Of course, it's in German, the language which they still use, and the old Froschauer Bible was the original Bible. Well, as we go through the museum, there are pieces that are related to everyday life, quilts, bed, unique things. This man, Joe Shetler, was in his barn one day and is walking out, and a strike of lightning goes through his hat, hits him here, and kills him. Well, that story is a prominent story in the Shetler family. I know descendants of that family who still talk about Joe Shetler being hit by lightning. So there are those kind of idiosyncratic artifacts here. Mm-hmm. These are the Mennonite churches in this area. The other side had Amish schools. Obviously, Mennonite churches have changed, evolved over time, that look much more similar to other Protestant churches than this example.
Right, and do they call them meeting houses still mostly?
That's interesting. The church that I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania, Mennonite Church, was called a meeting house throughout my whole life. I was in Pennsylvania recently, and I noticed the sign now says church. In my entire life, it was always meeting house, to make the distinction between the building and the people. Right. So more and more churches are now called churches. Again, these are family life things, an old pipe organ that would have been used by Mennonites, not Amish, family stove, hickory rocker.
Again, still mostly examples of a historical perspective.
Exactly. Yeah, this is all historical stuff. These genealogical charts, I think, are fascinating. Mm-hmm. This is the Troyer family, and if you go down in here, that's 1469. They're really, really early roots of this family, and all of the descendants are finely drawn into that chart. It's an amazing chart. Specific families, like the Swartzentruber family, the Yoder family, the Miller family. Families have donated things from their own family line, and they're in these cases.
What motivates them to give these to the museum?
Well, it's a way of preserving history, preserving your family. The identity of your family is really important. This is my wife's family, actually, and it's very important to them to remember these people and for people in the future to remember these people. So yeah, it's a way of preserving one's identity through time. A principle in Amish culture, the fancy German word for it is Gelassenheit. It's yielding self to the group, giving up self to the group. Humility is extremely important in Amish culture because the individual is never more important than the group. So when a minister finishes preaching at the end of a service, he always says, well, I may have said some things wrong, or I may need to be corrected. Will somebody give testimony to what I've said and correct my mistakes? That is very typical. When men are lining up in the barnyard to go into church, it's always, you go first. No, you go first. Nobody wants to go first because the individual asserts themselves in ways that say, I'm more important than you.
This program is available for purchase. To order your copy, please call 319-362-3027 or visit www.ruralheritage.com. Rural Heritage is a bi-monthly magazine dedicated to draft animal farming and logging, as well as other aspects of our rich rural heritage. It is published by Mishka Press, which also offers a complete line of Back to the Land books, DVDs, and calendars. Call or write for a catalog or subscription information. or visit our website at www.ruralheritage.com.